So in this text, Dionysus versus the Crucified, Girard goes through a close reading of what he regards as perhaps the most famous and iconic Nietzsche passage, which is the one where Nietzsche announces the death of God. But what you notice is that as much as it's become a cliche and that everybody recognizes and refers to this notion of the death of God, what they don't notice is that this death is actually framed by Nietzsche as a murder, and in fact framed as a collective murder, as something that Nietzsche says we have all done collectively. So this way that he argues that Nietzsche has not really been heard, that his most scandalous idea, the idea of the death of God, that the part of the scandal, as Girard says, is not really scandalous at all. The idea that God has just kind of passed away as a senile figure of the past, this kind of relic of an older culture, for Girard, this is just a sort of Enlightenment cliche. There's nothing scandalous about this kind of watered-down version of Nietzsche's death of God. And so the question is where the scandal really resides in this passage. And so for Girard, it actually resides elsewhere, not just in the idea that God is dead, but that God is the victim of a collective murder. And that Nietzsche, he argues, seems to intuit the relationship between God and the victim of collective murder, because the collective murder, as he sees it, is something that must generate rituals. And he says, as Nietzsche puts it, sacred games in order to compensate for this murder. In other words, Nietzsche also stumbles upon this idea that the result of this collective murder is the genesis of ritual. This, I think, for Girard is what's actually scandalous about this idea, is that he stumbles upon this this notion of the genesis of culture in the collective murder of a god. So it's also worth pointing out something else here, which is that Girard begins by noting that modern thought, as influenced by Nietzsche, seems to be unable to contend with a central aspect of his thinking, which is Nietzsche's virulent opposition to Christianity. According to Girard, modern intellectuals don't really focus on this aspect of Nietzsche because it seems sort of beside the point. Christianity is already discredited, dying out. Again, this is a kind of tired Enlightenment sort of argument. And so, why would Nietzsche, this supposedly avant-garde, path-breaking thinker, expend so much effort trying to debunk Christianity when it's already kind of dying out on its own? And so for Girard, this is another question here, right? Why is Nietzsche so obsessed with this? So Girard suggests that this kind of neglect of the anti-Christian element of Nietzsche is derived from Heidegger's reading of Nietzsche, where Heidegger largely resolves or sort of blends Christianity in with Platonism and the kind of larger Western intellectual legacy. So the question then is why Nietzsche regards Christianity specifically as worthy of such intense opposition. So the answer Girard offers is that Nietzsche essentially saw Christianity in the same way that is Girard, also does, as the religion that undoes the sacrificial power of archaic religion. Instead of allowing the process of sacralization, in other words, through sacrifice, through collective murder, to generate new rituals, generate new meanings, it proclaims the innocence of the victim, which sort of short-circuits this process by which culture can be regenerated through collective murder. So for Girard, Nietzsche's most important realization is that this is what Christianity does. For Nietzsche, Christianity needs to be combated, defeated, destroyed, because it has disabled this regeneration of the sacred. And according to Nietzsche, the end result of this situation is nihilism. The end result is the loss of any ability to find any kind of meaning in the world. What's important here is that, and Girard at a later point in his interview refers to his own thinking as Nietzscheism in reverse. So what does he mean by this? In a sense, basically what he means is that, like Nietzsche, he sees Christianity as the ultimate turning point in human history because it disables the process by which the sacred can be generated. For Nietzsche, this is the reason that Christianity needs to be overturned, so we can return to the pagan process of generating and propagating the sacred, which Nietzsche identifies with Dionysus and with the tragic, as of course does Girard. So Girard simply argues that this is intellectually perfectly sound, that Nietzsche's insight here is intellectually completely sound. Girard, in fact, has no objection to it, except that it is ethically monstrous, because, and he points this out several times, it is, and I quote here, "It is inseparable from the way that Nietzsche seems to justify all sorts of moral monstrosities, the willingness to accept mass killing and bloodshed in order to renew the world through a return to the sort of pagan sacred," end quote. So this is where Girard and Nietzsche converge, and also where they diverge. There are, I would say, these are, I think, the most important points. And again, one of them is a single point of convergence, which you can see right at the end of the essay Dionysus versus the Crucified, which is that Freud and Nietzsche are the two figures who, before Girard, discover the collective murder and its centrality to understanding the genesis of human culture. But both of them, in different ways, turn away from it or mystify it, according to Girard.